Curves in any design provide movement and interest. That principle applies to quilts as well. Yet when fabrics are cut and seamed to create curves, the process can be, well, frustrating, trying to get those opposing shapes to turn out smooth. To make the process enjoyable, I'll show you a carefree method of creating curves. This Drunkard's Path design is a quilt favorite. You'll learn how the curves are created effortlessly using a rather non-traditional technique. Quilt with Carefree Curves, that's what's next on Sewing with Nancy. The traditional way of making a quarter circle block, as you saw in the Drunkard's Path design, is to have two shapes. And I've taped my fabric to my templates just so that you could see that they have two opposing curves. And these have to be seamed together. You pin them together, and when you do that, you will pin them at the ends and once in the middle, because it's hard to pin them together in this area, and usually and always I should say, the outer curve seems longer than the inner curve. So to do the sewing for this with 1/4 of an inch seam allowances, you use kind of some finger pins. First get started, and then pin with your fingers to get those edges to meet. And you have to kind of move that around, remove that center pin, and then go for the home stretch. And this is a very traditional way of making any of curve shapes. And I have to say, it works. It certainly works, and if you have templates like that at home, you can use them for these projects. But, you know, sometimes it's hard to get that shape exactly perfect. And I didn't do so bad. This is one I made yesterday, and I had a little problem giving a bowed area on the side. You press the seam allowances there, and you'd have the block. Another option the carefree option that I'm going to share with you is this has not been completely sewn, but you cut a complete square for the background. Fusible interfacing technique is used, and you get a smooth curve every time. This will later be applied into place. You can make it in many sizes. The template that I'm going to be using, you can make these 3 sizes from 4 to 6 to 8 inch blocks, and you use one template. In this program, we're going to use this template to make quarter circle blocks and whole circles. This is a 2-part series, and in the second program, we're going to make a very crazy name, Hearts and Gizzards block, very traditional block, but again, to get those curves, rather than sewing opposing curves together, we're going to use a template that will give 5 sizes. And then you could also make a fan shape or a circle shape or a wagon wheel shape, and this is called a fan shape, and you can make 5 different sizes with smoothness, a carefree technique, and that's what I'll be detailing now. The quarter circle block has so many options for design layout. You saw the Drunkard's Path, you'll see that again, but this is called Mohawk's Trail, and there's a 16 block section in the middle, and on each end I have 4 blocks. It's a tummy time quilt for little kids learning how to creep and crawl to be on the floor, and we will give you the instructions to make this specific design in the book that accompanies the program. And behind me is the same block in a very contemporary look. It's a block in process. It's going to be a dramatic wall hanging and made of the quarter circle blocks, and you can see there's one block and they're just flipped and flopped to have the motion. But to make these, I'm going to show you the details. You saw the interfacing in the sample earlier, but how do you get there? You can make it using the traditional templates. You're certainly welcome to do that, but if you'd like to make quarter circles, you can start by tracing a circle. And on this template, there are 3 different options for sizes. And on the side of the template that shows the quarter circle, you just read how you should cut squares, not circles. You're going to cut squares. You'll cut a 9-inch square for the circles, and for this particular block, it's 6.5-inch background fabric. I'm making a little smaller one for the sample. If you're wondering why such a big block, well, I'll show you in a minute, but also must mention that you, of the same size, cut fusible interfacing. And I have the smooth side facing the right side of the fabric, and then the fusible side to the underside. You place the template on the square, And you don't have to cut these perfectly square because we're going to trim this a little bit later, and then you trace in the die cut areas all the way around. Also trace the marks down the quarter areas because we're going to be cutting this apart, but we'll sew once, cut after the fact, and then mark all these areas as I mentioned.